Good afternoon. I'd like to thank also the conference organizers for the invitation. It's a real pleasure to be here and to interact with this group. I really appreciated all the panels, especially the morning panel. It's very informative for me to listen to the stories of the young people. Economists have this peculiar position of talking a lot about unemployment and knowing very little about it, more specifically about the faces of unemployment. We talk about these, unemployment in these abstract terms. We really try to remove the personal from the unemployed, and we come up with all sorts of absurd concepts and theories and rationales for why it exists and how we really cannot solve it. After all, it's our profession that came up with the natural unemployment rate, now called the NAIRU. And basically, this is pure and simple a reflection of our failure to come up with the solution. We've just relabeled the problem, right? And so, a few years ago, we would tell you that the natural unemployment rate was 5.5%, which means that all of our youngsters here that are having difficulty finding a job are probably naturally unemployed, and the economy can't do very much to solve the problem. Now that we have had even greater difficulty solving this problem, we've relabeled the problem, and the Fed has come up with papers that tells you that the natural unemployment is 6.7%. So we should really congratulate ourselves because we have reached it. We have finally come down from our highs, and we have reached 6.7%. For Spain, I believe it was the IMF that put the NAIRU at 26%. Right? It is these kinds of this kind of logic that drives a lot of our policies for full employment. So I'm going to take the discourse again at the macro level and talk in broad brushstrokes about how we think about solving the problem of unemployment, why it is inadequate, and how we need to reorient it to find a solution. So the first point I'd like to make is that to the extent that we have failed to solve the unemployment problem, not just today, but in the for the majority of the post-war era, and to the extent that young people suffer disproportionately from the problem of unemployment, then our failure is that much more serious, right? That much more acute. The young unemployment rates, you heard a lot of the statistics yesterday, but they have more than double the national rates. Their unemployment rate goes fastest than everybody else, comes down slowest than everybody else. The gap between the national unemployment rate and youth unemployment rate is widening, so that means that our failure is that much greater. And we have seen this really dramatic drop-off in employment to population rates amongst the young people, and there's this sort of mass exodus from the labor force that we have observed across the board that has really explained the improvement in the unemployment situation. When fewer people are looking for work, voila, we solve the problem, right? They're voluntarily unemployed, as our narrow definitions will have it. So let me talk about some of the broader problems of unemployment, and just really isolate one particular one that deserves a lot more attention. It's long-term unemployment. We have really serious problems since 2008, but the long-term unemployment problem has been brewing for 4 decades. And what that means is that a greater and greater share of those who end up unemployed end up being unemployed for longer periods of time. There is a ratchet effect since the 70s, where in every recession, unemployment develops, but long-term unemployment, accelerates, reaches certain peaks, and then it comes down. But in subsequent recessions, the peaks are higher, the lows are not as low. And now we have this sort of secular long-term trend in unemployment. Now this is particularly devastating to all. It's not just the costs of unemployment, foregone output, and all of these indirect costs that society pays. We already are paying, right? The unemployed are already in the public sector. We have a policy that kind of sanctions this situation of long-term unemployment. There is a serious problem with the mark of unemployment. Anecdotally, you will see, probably you've searched monster.com, and a lot of job openings explicitly state the unemployed need not apply. Well, that's precisely the problem we need to solve. How are we going to solve it? If that is, and there is a reason for this that I'll get to. Recent research indicates that in the eyes of the employer, 9 months of loss of unemployment equate to 4 years of loss of work experience. So the employers are looking at resumes, and they will first hire somebody who's employed, second, somebody who's been unemployed for a short period of time, and last, those who are long-term unemployed. Unemployment breeds unemployability, right? So it is the failure of solving the problem today means necessarily that we will fail to solve it tomorrow. So how do we think about unemployment? At the macro level and just the simplest possible terms, what do we think about how do we create jobs? Well, usually you will hear supply side and demand side policies, but I want to make the case that they are all pretty much trickle down policies. And whatever policies there are, they never trickle far down enough in the form of adequate number of jobs. The problem really is volume of jobs, the number of job opportunities out there. So you associate, the conventional approach, the supply side economics, Bob talked about it yesterday, you normally associate it with cuts in top marginal tax rates, and the idea is that you provide the incentives to the job creators and investment grows and they create jobs, and jobs are byproduct of this kind of policy. But then there is the other camp that will say, no, this doesn't work. It has shown not to work for the last 4 decades. We can do, quote-unquote, Keynesian demand-side policies. Just spend pro-growth, pro-investment policies. But these two, you can make the case, are trickle-down policies. They just really never trickle down far enough in the form of jobs for all. And that's my definition of full employment. It is a situation where everyone who wants to participate in the economy has that right, that opportunity to do so, as enshrined in the Constitution of Spain. I didn't know this, but in many other important documents, right? So here's another wrinkle in the problem of the conventional method. So we have pro-growth, pro-investment orientation. We've had it for the majority of the post-war era. It hasn't really given us true full employment. Generally how it works is we basically provide either subsidies to banks or firms or contracts, just direct contracts, and we say go build something, invest, and generate jobs. And that was really a large part of what the Recovery Act also did, provided a lot of direct contracts. What you would find is that whenever the public sector tries to create jobs this way, it basically underwrites the employment processes that take place in the private sector. It basically reinforces them. So if the private sector wants to hire the employable first and the unemployed and long-term unemployed last, then by definition, public policy will do the same because you're working through that channel. And if you're looking at the employment cycles of different types of occupations, you find that the job creation occurs in high-tech industries, low employment elasticity, high-wage sectors, and the story is a little more complicated because at the same time you have this hollowing out of the middle class, the loss of stable, well-paying manufacturing sector jobs. But what you find is that the high-wage occupations have very different employment cycles. Smaller dips in unemployment, shorter, narrower duration of unemployment, quick, faster recovery, earlier recoveries. The medium wage and the low wage occupations, earlier dips, much more dramatic, longer spells of unemployment. It basically the story of the virtuous cycle in the high skill occupation and the vicious cycle in the middle, and the bottom. Now, moral of the story is, of course, stay in school. But as we have seen today, even those who stay in school those who have not had the high-wage job to lose and then get reemployed, you that are just about to enter are still experiencing a problem with just entering, that game. And if you were lucky to enter and get those high-wage occupations, then you will definitely do better than the vast majority of the unemployed. We have a serious problem for those that don't have the the exclusive education, right? So we need to find a way to deal with the problem quite directly. It's really... we don't need to work through incentives in these various pro-growth channels where employment is always at the far end of the transmission mechanism. You just have to flip the story and make pro-employment policy that delivers the sustainable growth you want. Another way to think about this, and there are a number of proposals that do this. You may have heard of the employer of last resort, the job guarantee. These are policies that are public sector employment programs that guarantee a job opportunity for anyone ready and willing and able to work. They would be federally funded, but various administrative mechanisms. You could run them through the local sector and the nonprofit sector, nonprofit social entrepreneurial sector. We could talk about this in the details, but there is quite a bit in the literature about the merits of this type of approach. And there are two arguments that you can make. You can make a macroeconomic argument, why they are superior to the current conventional model, and you can make a moral argument, why they fulfill that basic human right, the right to employment. So I'm not going to deal with those two specific arguments. What I want to focus on is, well, maybe the moral argument a little bit, and then give you examples of policies around the world. When we think, so my thinking is that we just are missing a crucial piece of the safety net. There's one type of safety net that's missing. Whenever we talk about homelessness, the solution is a home. Right? When we talk about food insecurity, the solution is food. Retirement income insecurity, the solution is retirement income. Job insecurity, unemployment insurance, subsidies, more education, unemployment insurance. Now you want a job, right? And so what you could think of is, notwithstanding all of the other policies that we have, and certainly education is very important, and those should be training, should be a very important part of the way we do business, and all of the unemployment insurance and all of the other safety nets are quite important, but we need to add one more. We need to add a public option for jobs. If you do not want to stay on unemployment insurance, if you'd like to get some public sector experience in a job that serves the public purpose, not in the private sector that manufactures something, right? In a job that fits the needs of the community with the resources, the idle resources of the community. If you'd like to do something like that, and perhaps you would want to propose that project, we will evaluate it and we will fund it. And that could be the stepping stone that will permit you to transition into alternative private, public, nonprofit employment opportunities. So we can talk about that, what that might look like. But basically what I'm proposing is a YES. I have a little acronym, a Youth Employment Safety Net. There are many reasons why these policies, if they're designed as voluntary programs rather than workfare, and they commit to providing opportunities for all, have all sorts of positive externalities and benefits beyond just the creation of full employment. But there are experiences around the world that we can look to see how these programs work. I was talking to Natalia earlier in the, I studied the Argentinian program and the Plan Jefes, but there are programs that are specifically and carefully targeted to youth that have yielded surprisingly positive effects. The UK implemented a Future Jobs Fund in 2009, which was a job guarantee for youth. And the organizations were granted, they proposed the projects for youth job creation, and the organizations had to create net new jobs. They shouldn't substitute for other jobs. Serve the communities especially in high-demand areas, transition workers to sustained employment. The outcomes were that these were especially well targeted to the age groups 18 to 24, enhanced specialized transferable skills. People didn't get stuck in the program. The program was, they were eligible for 2 years, but within a year, many transitioned out of those programs. And it was dubbed one of the most successful programs in recent history. There are flaws because the program has been now generalized to be a job guarantee for all, but it's punitive. You lose your unemployment insurance if you don't participate. So there are other issues. The youth guarantee seems to have become quite important in the Eurozone. There is a proposal for youth guarantee, it's called the Youth Guarantee Proposal in the European Union, so that all countries implement these kinds of job guarantee policies in all of these countries. So I think that's where the funding is coming from, but the thing is the funding is capped. It's not like in the Future Jobs Fund where you just float the budget. However many people show up, you hire them, you float the budget. If you cap the budget, you can't you're going to get 3,000 jobs, right? Yeah. You're not going to get the number of jobs that you want. But it is motivated by the correct sort of philosophy that you want to target unemployment and activity, but you want this to be a preventative policy. You don't want to deal with the cure once unemployment it develops so much that it's so difficult to deal with it, but you catch it just as it develops, right? And you stop all of these vicious problems from multiplying that come from unemployment. And we don't really need to look much further from the United States to see the effectiveness of these policies. In 1987, we had something called youth entitlement, which provided part-time job during the school year and a full-time offer over the summer for those who stay in school. And it was especially well targeted because there was a high take-up by black youth that tend to experience the highest levels of unemployment. The jobs were run through the nonprofits, through the states, localities, and some private sector jobs. And what's interesting is that by various evaluation criteria, they performed equally effective. So this notion that the public sector and nonprofit sector cannot create jobs, or they're not, good jobs, they make work, is not true. The common objection to these policies is that it's just so hard to implement. And you look at it from the New Deal to Argentina to these programs, they're up and running quite quickly, and they generate genuine jobs. This particular problem reduced black unemployment by 30%, doubled the employment rate, and wiped out black and white employment differential. What it demonstrated, it was lack of number of jobs that was the problem, and discrimination, not the supply side problems, not that the youth were, unmotivated, unskilled, etc. There was a dramatic increase in short-term post-program earnings. The long term wasn't studied, so we don't know. The youth transitioned. Program offered up to 3 years participation, but on average, youth stayed in it for 13 months. It was low cost. Implementation was not a problem. It was eventually capped, and it's a sure way to reform it and then phase it out, right? So the floating budget was removed. So we can talk a lot more about this, but we're talking about 3 to 4 million missing youth jobs today. And the cost of providing a job guarantee along those lines of the youth entitlement program would vary between 28 billion and 37 billion per year. There are many ways to compare this, but it is a very low cost considering the savings that occur from all of these other support programs and social and economic problems that unemployment generates. So we basically have 2 roads to full employment. One that we have tried for decades, the pro-growth, pro-investment road that hasn't delivered the number of jobs. And we have the other one, the bottom-up, on-the-spot, direct employment approach. And one of these still remains the road not taken. Thank you.